If we can get people taking their seats, we're going to be ready to go in just a couple moments here. All right, thank you everybody. We're going to begin or continue with the business. I'm going to turn it over to our clerk to establish quorum.
Good morning, everyone. Our registered count for citizens attending in person has stayed static at 194 registrants. How many people do we have online? We have 19 people online, and I am satisfied that we have the balance in the room, so we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So I see you've got someone coming to microphone 1. Chair will recognize the speaker at microphone 1. Please introduce yourself.
Is this on? Is it on? Tansei Boonmatan, Sasha Hobbs, North Fraser Métis Association. I'd like to move a special order for Resolution A, which is the jurisdiction of our children resolution, that if we are not complete with the other resolutions by 11 a.m., that we move to discussion of that very important resolution.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? I recognize the speaker number 4.
Peter Lang, Chilliwack Métis Association. I second it.
Thank you very much.
So just a brief explanation of this. The motion has been made. We'll make a consideration of Resolution A special order of business for 11 a.m., meaning that if we are in the middle of discussing a resolution at 11 o'clock, when the clock strikes 11, we will put that business aside temporarily and we will move immediately to discussion of Resolution A. This is it is a debatable motion, and it will require a 2/3 vote to adopt.
And did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do, Marseille. My view is that there is no greater business of the nation than the protection and care of our children. And I appreciate that as a nation, all of our legislation is important. We're at a critical time in our nation building, and where if our Section 35 rights do not extend to the protection and care of our children with a mandate from our nation, we're missing an opportunity to move on this issue with the force of the voice of our nation. So for that reason, I would at the very least hope that we could discuss it at this AGM and not carry it over, because I think our children deserve to be put first.
And I know we had a seconder if you wish to make a comment.
Yeah, Peter Lang, Chilliwack Métis. Yeah, this is 20 years too late, I think. Like, we need to get on it right away. We're losing children, I would say, every month in MCFD. So we need to take that control back of our children. I know a lot of people know a bit about my history in losing my child in 2015, who was under the supervision of MCFD. And there were lots of things that were done in his case. You can go read the report on the Representative for Children and Youth site. But one of the things that happened in his case was he was moved over to Campbell River. And we were not allowed to even know where he was living. He was with strangers, even though my mom, who's Métis, lives right there. My sister, who's Métis, and a nurse, lives right there in Campbell River, and we did not have that control over our own child, and we lost him. So that's the urgency of this, that we get it done today so we can leave here and know that we're going to take back our children.
Thank you. This is a motion that allows for more discussion, but of course that also adds to the time, and I've seen the outpour here. I will open it up if there's any more discussion, or we can proceed to the vote that requires 2/3. So if there's anyone, just please jump up if you want to continue the discussion. Otherwise, we will proceed to a vote, or any hands online. I'm not seeing any. Oh, I am seeing one, so I will recognize the speaker at microphone number 3.
Betty Ann McDonnell, Nicola Valley District, Métis. Some may think we have a good mechanism in place, and that is the Métis Commission, to ensure that children aren't being adopted and scattered everywhere. And I can say that within the last year, a child from one of my communities was 2 weeks away from being adopted. The parents had been told by MCFD, no, you're not Métis. We looked, you're not. And they were putting that child up for adoption. The only reason I got involved was because a social worker who knew me knew that I was a leader for that area and called me because they were thinking of apprehending another child from that family. And I'm very grateful because Colleen Lucier, from the Kamloops Métis Children and Families, as well as the Métis Commission, once I got to call them, stepped in. That child has not been adopted and is being returned to their Métis family. So the Métis Commission doesn't always, but they also have to have that information. Whereas when I sit at the table with chiefs, if a child from their community, they have an appointed rep or themselves. If a child from their community is going to be or has been apprehended, they immediately know so that they can help put in place safeguards. And so our children deserve absolutely nothing less. And in the time that the province and the federal government dragged their feet, how many children have we lost? Marcy?
We've also got 2 online, and I'm just going to remind, and I appreciate those words, Betty, but I think those are more in line when we discuss the resolution. At this time, we're just discussing whether or not this motion to have that time at 11 o'clock, we stop whatever other business. And so that's the point of this discussion, and then we'll vote whether or not we do that. But I do appreciate those words, Betty. We have a couple online. They just put their hands down, and I have a speaker at microphone number 1.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Peter, for sharing a bit of Nick's story. That's tragic. And Betty Ann, thank you for sharing. I just want to make a point that this, and I know I'm going to be out of order because I do want to see this go to a vote very soon because we have a lot of business, but this is very important to our nation. We have severed our ties with the Métis Commission of BC, and that's why this resolution is even more important, so our children will be brought back to our nation. So thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, not seeing any more speakers or on hands, I'm going to go to a vote. This is something that can be done by unanimous consent. Again, it requires 2/3, but if we can get 100%, that obviously beats 2/3. So I'll look, if there's any objection to the special order motion, to have that at 11 o'clock, we commence with speaking on this resolution if we're not already there. If there's any objection, please raise your hand, either in person here or online. Seeing no objection, that passes with unanimous consent. So if we're not already speaking to it at 11, we will pause with whatever we're dealing and proceed with Resolution A at 11. And just for this is, we're on resolution 6. This is one of those, the next two matters, 6 and 7 are matters that were originated from the Electoral Act Committee. And so I will again take my hat off as a co-chair at this time and keep my hat as a committee member in case there's any questions or context required.
Good morning. If you are following along in your book, page 79 is resolution 6, and I will pass it off to the clerk.
Resolution 6, Regulatory Authority for Elections. The legislation affected is the Electoral Act and the MNGA Act. This was submitted by the MNGA via the Electoral Act Committee to the AGM clerk June 4th, 2023, and will require a majority vote to adopt. Whereas after an election is called, there may be an urgent need for additional or amended rules specific to the election. And MNBC citizens meet once annually at the AGM, and urgent changes for the rules for an election may not be dealt with in a timely fashion. And the MNGA is the legislative body of the MNBC as set out in the Constitution, and it is well within the MNGA mandate to provide additional guidance to the MNBC's democratic process. Be it resolved that the following be added to the Electoral Act as Section 45. Regulatory Authority. The Métis Nation Governing Assembly may, by resolution, make election rules regarding matters not specifically set out in the Electoral Act. Such rules will expire 30 days after Election Day for the election they pertain to. And the following be added as Article 4.8 to the Métis Nation Governing Assembly Act. 4.8, the MNGA may, by resolution, make election rules regarding matters not specifically set out in the Electoral Act. Such rules will expire 30 days after Election Day for the election they pertain to.
Thank you. Do I have a mover? Go ahead.
Caitlin Bird, Métis Nation, Greater Victoria. I move this resolution.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Jeff Crozier, Rocky Mountain Métis Association, I'll second.
Thank you. Go ahead, Caitlin.
In this past year or term, there has been a by-election, and we've used actually similar strategies. We've been able to have temporary election rules to counter a potential domino effect of ongoing by-elections. And so there has been examples, and there are unique situations that emerge between terms and between elections when it's important to have temporary election rules. And this, again, will be determined by the community leadership and the MNBC board that comprises the MNGA. So there is some level of ensuring that there is agreement across to make sure this goes forward. There are circumstances that we can't anticipate between the election terms, and so it's important to have it so we can make those moments and make those decisions when they arise. And as mentioned, they are only temporary. They would expire 30 days after the election. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go to Mike 4.
Good morning, David Allard, Saminar Métis. As Caitlin mentioned, there was a recent precedence where similar situation arose, and that informs this resolution. So either that precedent, that special MNGA, was appropriate and quote-unquote legal, or it wasn't. Now, I believe it was, and it can be done again, regardless of this, if this passes or not. I think this is partly symbolic, because it has happened before, and we could do it again without this resolution. So I'd like to submit a motion for a postponement for this resolution. Thank you.
All right, I need to ask if there's a seconder for Dave's motion to postpone. Okay, Mike 2.
Vince Van Oringen, Region 7. I second the motion to postpone indefinitely this resolution.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I've said what I wanted to say. Thank you. That's under 2 minutes, right? I'm not giving them to you.
All right, I'm going to invite more comments, so Mike 2.
So this is very dangerous, as David said, Mr. Allard. I've had many people, and not to be, I guess the best way to explain this would be that, as mentioned by our previous speaker, emotioned that this gives power to our elected officials and presidents. Yes, it also gives power to our current board of directors, current presidents, current vice presidents who sit on the MNGA, who will be in the election running next year, to change rules, to add rules to an election during an election. This is not okay. This is not democratic. This is not how democracy works. You do not allow our federal government to change rules during an election. Now, I'm not saying anything would be done wrong, but it opens a big gray area of what can be done, what rules could be added, because it doesn't specify what they can do. It just says, allows them to add and special resolutions or rules that will go until 30 days after the election. It's very dangerous from a democratic perspective. We're trying to build self-governance. We're trying to make sure that we're recognized. This will not do any good for us. Our presidents, yes, I agree, should. But our board of directors, currently from MNBC, should not have that power. So if there was an amendment, a way to do it, where the presidents and representatives of our communities and our grassroots had the capability of doing that, then could be a little more easy to see, but it's definitely something that we need to look at. So election rules should not be changed and added after an election has been called. That's really just the basis of it. Yeah, I've had people call it the Putin resolution, so it's not democratic. Thank you.
Go ahead, Angel.
Angel Robinson, Métis Nation, Greater Victoria. I'm also in favor of postponing. I do think that we need flexibility when emerging issues come up. However, I also agree that this resolution can open vulnerabilities. And I think it could just use some more checks and balances written in so that we have accountability and transparency written into the resolution. Thanks.
We're now going to go an online comment from Shirley Goulet. Go ahead, Shirley.
Good morning. Shirley Goulet from Region 3. I guess by your reaction, you're hearing. All right, great. I'm also opposed to this. I think that there's going to be too much danger, conflict of interest, and too much relay with people thinking that they can propose things that shouldn't be included in the election process whatsoever. And the speakers before me were all correct in everything that they said. And so I just following up to say I'm totally opposed to this also, and I think that it should be postponed indefinitely.
Go ahead, Mike 3.
Caitlin Bird, Métis Nation, Greater Victoria. Just provide some context and some numbers behind if the board were to participate in the vote. They comprise only 20% of the votes for the MNGA, and so it would require that the community leadership would have to vote something through for anything to pass. In my experience, I have seen there be mindful abstentions when there might be conflicts of interest, which comes into account as well. Thank you.
So based on some of the discussion that has happened, I think it would be helpful if I made a couple of clarifications on what the resolution states. In both of the section 45 that is proposed to add to the Electoral Act and also the Métis Nation Governing Assembly Act, it does say make election rules regarding matters not specifically set out in the Electoral Act. would this resolution pass, it would not allow for the Electoral Act to be amended outside of the regular legislative process of amending a piece of legislation. It would allow the MNGA to make something that is not expressly mentioned in the Electoral Act. So an example, the Electoral Act says that to be nominated for the office of president, you require 20 signatures. The MNGA wouldn't be able to make a resolution or special order making that 15 or 30. That would require a legislative amendment. But if there's something that is not specifically stated in the Electoral Act, like if you wanted to put limits on campaign financing, that is something that could be, that would fall under this resolution. And that's why it specifically states in there, because it is granting authority to an elected body, yes, but we don't want to have it that it supersedes and makes MNBC legislation pointless. So the other thing too is that there can be discussions about, you know, the authority and the supremacy of our governing assembly. I do believe that in something like this, where it does pertain to an election, and elections could be challenged by the Senate or, you know, perhaps in other bodies, it's best to have express written consent instead of verbal implied consent. So I hope that clarifies things.
So I'm going to invite comments from Louis first and then Vince. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Louis DeJager, Region 2 Director. I'm not reading a threat into this at all. That was brought to our electoral committee, and they're the ones who are putting this forward to recommend it. I actually see it as strengthening our democracy and putting democracy in the hands where it belongs, and that's our community presidents, and that's our communities, and that's our people. So that a candidate, say, can't just come in with like $500,000 and run a campaign that's so overwhelming to somebody who wants to run and has no money, and completely be able to get their word out over somebody else. So this is a check and balance by the communities to make sure that an election truly is fair according to whatever environment we might be in. So it is dynamic, like Métis people are. We react when we're threatened. I think this is a checks and balance that we need in our Electoral Act to strengthen and make sure that communities and the presidents have a say in how we do our elections.
Vince Van Morgan, Region 7. So I completely...
I apologize.
Sorry, go
We're
ahead.
going to mic 3 because you've already spoken. And we'll come back to you, Vince.
You bet.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarity, if you could, John. If the MNGA has already done this in the past, from what I'm hearing from Caitlin and Dave, do we even need this or not need this? Isn't this just the way things work right now?
Yeah, I can speak to that as one of the members of the Electoral Act Committee. One of the things that we saw that this was a reactionary decision. There was I believe it was a special MNGA called to deal with certain issues that that weren't, or was at least an MNGA or special MNGA called. I think the belief is that it's an inherent power that, and I think Mr. Allard or President Allard mentioned that it's something that it appears that, or it was the belief at the time that the MNGA had the authority and the power inherent to do that, given that it wasn't expressly prohibited or discussed in the act itself. The intention from the committee was to put that power expressly into our legislation to clarify the extent of what that might look like and how that might be exercised. So to take it from the more nebulous to a bit more specific by addressing it through a specific piece of legislation. Some of the things that we've experienced over the last few years, because of COVID and other things like that, it was deemed helpful to have some clarification on what kind of, I don't want to say emergency, but unforeseen, when there's unforeseen circumstances that come up in between, not necessarily an election cycle, but given that it takes a year, and it used to be even more difficult when you had only one MNGA a year to be able to pass rules or legislation, that this was to a way to address gaps that were seen within legislation because of things that hadn't been foreseen and therefore not addressed in legislation previously. So the intention was to kind of codify the authority that the MNGA had previously demonstrated or used.
So as a follow-up then, if we postpone this, in the opinion of our governing body, John, I guess, does the MNGA have that power again, or do we need to confirm it today in order to ensure they have it now that we're out of COVID and don't have those massive restrictions?
Well, I would say that, as President Allard said, it's the authority. For example, you wouldn't have the community or the nation saying, expressing that this is something that they don't believe is an authority. By postponing indefinitely, it kind of leaves everything at the status quo, and by precedence and what's been expressed previously by the MNGA, it's set a precedent for acting in this way.
So then a postponement is a confirmation, in essence, is kind of what I'm getting at.
I wouldn't say it's confirmation. I think it leaves the question out there to just where we are currently, as opposed to the nation expressing an opinion one way or the other by codifying it or rejecting it.
Thank you.
I think all my points were addressed. I do want to stress, and I know it was a slip of tongue, Mark, but I am not a governing body. I want to make that very clear.
Okay, we're going to go into mic 3 first, then 2, then 4. Thank you.
Conche, can you hear me? Patrick Harriott, Métis Nation Greater Victoria, and Region 1 Director. I'm also on the Electoral Act Committee, so I was part of those discussions, and I just want to reiterate some of the points because I think that what's at issue here is we've already been exercising these things when it comes to campaign finance, and when it came to that knock-on effect as during the by-election, as was previously mentioned. And what this does is it codifies and it leaves it less nebulous. And I think it's good to have the language in the act as opposed to leaving it nebulous. So I'm in favor of proceeding with this.
Vince Van Morgan, Region 7. So some things that have been said I'd like to touch point on. Again, presidents, yes, there are grassroots. But 20% of that MNGA is our board of directors, our regional directors. That's 20%. Nobody can downplay 20% of a vote. I'm sorry to say. That is why this is an issue to many people, is that if 31% vote against, 20% of our MNGA can vote for, and it's going to pass. So having those directors is the concern, having the current board governing body sitting on here, being able to make those. And it may not be things that are going to be detrimental or could be manipulative or fraudulent or whatever. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but it leaves a very gray area for anything to be happen with the wording and how this is put. Now, again, it has been able to be done. We can do what's needed to be done, and we have done without this motion. So I don't think it needs to be put in, and many people would agree from the North. Words like power gives power to the presidents and the MNGA. Yes, it gives power, but it gives power to the current board of directors and the current representatives of MNBC who most likely will be running in the next election. So again, I speak highly against, personally, as well as many people from the North speak against this, and we would like to see this put off indefinitely.
Go ahead, Dave.
David Allard, Seminar Métis. I was part of the electoral committee, and when we discussed this, I did express some concerns about the potential for this to address certain issues that were beyond the scope of what I thought it was mostly meant to address, which are matters of a more routine, practical aspect. As an example, say the election next year is in September, and or even August or whatever, there's a provincial state of emergency, and there's areas that are severely affected in a way that would impact their right to vote. And then I believe this could be applicable. It would add nimbleness to the process where we could just perhaps even extend the writ period and so on and so forth. So I think those things, no one would really be against using something of this nature for those reasons. But my concerns were beyond that, and they relate to checks and balances, which was just brought up, and that applies to all situations. It should apply to everyone. So there's one scenario where I would be amenable to retracting my postponement, and that would be if there was an amendment, and I may submit this, that would include a language that would refer specifically to this authority to enact rules would not apply to deciding if an individual is eligible or not to run in an election. I think that's what we're talking about here. So I'd retract my postponement if language was included to that matter. I just want to address things in a straightforward manner here. I don't think we want to take the chance that comes about with this resolution here. So I'm still supporting a postponement, but I wanted to share my thoughts on a few matters regarding this. Thank you.
We're just going to address some of Dave's comments before moving on.
So thank you for that. Excuse me. I understand that this resolution and the proposed language is to provide kind of a catch-all of everything that's not captured in legislation. So it doesn't specifically state what the MNGA could create a resolution on. It says that if something specifically is stated in the Electoral Act, they can't. Nominations of candidates under Article 8 and then 8.3, the article starts with any Métis citizen is eligible to be nominated as a candidate if, and then it provides a long list of criteria. Were this resolution to pass and be put in the Electoral Act, the MNGA wouldn't necessarily be able to make and actually the MNGA would probably not be able to make a resolution declaring a candidate invalid or not, if it's not based on the eligibility criteria that's already in the Electoral Act, and they couldn't add another provision on that without amending the Electoral Act. So this resolution would not give the MNGA power to say that candidate X we have declared ineligible.
Okay, I'm just going to let everybody know the order. We're going to go to Cheryl at mic 3, then Linda, mic 2, then we have an online comment, and then Louis will come to you. Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. I speak in support of this resolution as part of the Electoral Act Committee. It was well thought out. And to another member's comments about the fact that 20% would be our board of directors, I personally want to state, in my opinion, that our board of directors are elected by our people, and I feel we have to trust them to a point of using that 20% in the best way for our people, just like the presidents do in individual communities. So again, I speak in support. Thank you.
Go ahead, Linda.
Tanshe, Linda Van Waringen from Fort St. John. I am opposed to this resolution as it is written right now. It needs to be reworked. It needs to be reworded if it is to go through. I agree with many of the other participants here that are citizens that are talking and saying there is a gray area. It needs to be clarified a lot better, and so for that fact, I would like to also agree with the indefinite postponement. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to mic 3 now. Yeah, we'll go to mic 3.
Good morning, June Graham, Alberni Clayoquot, President. I'm trying to wrap my head around this and try to understand it, so I've been going and asking people. So what I'm hearing perhaps might be a concern is that if it's appears to be a conflict of interest, say the 20% of our board, 20% being the board at our MNGA, can we not put something in there that says that they step away from, they abstain because of perhaps a conflict? And as well, I really want folks to understand that this is empowering your communities and your presidents, which is something we've been fighting for a long time, to have that. And so at the MNGA table, what I understand is this empowers us as leaders. And I would suggest that if there's a direct conflict, if it has anything to do with elections and it being an election year, then that certainly would be a direct conflict for the 20% of the board to vote on that. But I certainly support, as a president, having that voice. So I just want people to understand that more. So if we need clarification, please ask for it. If you don't quite understand all this, ask the folks to stand up and explain it to you about exactly what we're doing here. Thank you very much.
So, just so for some context, because I think it assists, and I appreciated Cheryl's comments from the Electoral Act Committee. One of the things when we discussed this was looking at, and I think this goes to some of Mr. Van Wergen's comments, some of these issues arose because of, in the between election cycles, if I can put it that way, because there were by-elections and there were certain consequences that we saw, or complaints or concerns that we heard from community members, from other individuals. And so in the instances where this has been used, these rules have not, for example, been where the entirety of the board would have been at voting. So it might have been only one position or two positions. So it wasn't necessarily a situation where it would affect, if I can put it that way, the rule change would affect every member of the board. And you also had, we discussed, there were examples where you might have community presidents who are running for the same position as board. So if there were conflicts for one, there might be conflicts for others. So it was, the wording we kept was kind of general because it wasn't clear, depending on what the context of a specific rule change that might be contemplated for what kind of election, whether it's a general election or a special election or a by-election, that it was unforeseen what exact context there were, and so to leave it broad for the MNGA for consideration. So I appreciate the comments and some of the stuff that was raised and discussed at the Electoral Act Committee. And so I just want to put that those are some of the things where conflicts were discussed and things like that, but was kept broad because it was so nebulous. And again, as Mr. Beaker commented, a way to kind of capture the limits, if I can put it that way, of the of the MNGA in using these rules as was used in the past, by noting that it would regard matters not specifically set out. In one example, a matter of eligibility, that's a matter that is set out in legislation, so something that would not be according to this legislation, or the suggested comments from that was put forward, that would not be eligible for rules, whereas if it was kept more nebulous, might be a bit more difficult. So that was something I wanted to raise, especially from the last two comments.
We're going to go to comment online from Jordan, Jolene, sorry. Go ahead, Jolene. Yeah, we've got 3 speakers, so we're going to let them speak first. Go ahead, mic 3.
If I understand that it's happening, and it's just happening out there in the netherworld, and we're practicing doing it, who knows we're practicing if we don't have it written down?
Yeah, we're going to go to online comment from Shirley, and then Louis, you'll be our last speaker.
Region 2 Director. As a teacher and a person with certification in Indigenous governments, as part of my degree, I've studied and looked at a lot of different things. I have faith in our electoral committee, and I have faith that we put them there to do a job, to put safeguards in place. This is a very good safeguard. I love June's comment, and I'd love if June seconded me on an amendment where that anyone who's elected or potentially going to be elected could not put forward any suggestions, so that we leave it right in the hands of all of the presidents and the MNGA to do that. Would that, what I'm hearing, that seems to be the gist of any argument against this, and I think that would clear it up, so that you couldn't, for your own advantage, put in rules that would help you get elected. So I think I'm speaking in the right vein. If we could maybe put that amendment, could I ask June to back me on this?
June Graham, I'll second that.
Point of clarification, please. Are we not addressing a postponement motion at this point?
Actually,
Yes, Dave, the motion to amend is in order, so we will address that one first.
So, if I could please have the resolution on the screen and also on the screen in front of me. I think we can add the suggested amended text in the part of the resolution that is amending the MNGA Act, because we're proposing a new Article 4.8, which is under voting and quorum, which means that we would also be able to, we can put restrictions on proposals from candidates that are in there. I do need to state that it's very difficult to make a rule to force somebody to abstain their vote if they have a conflict of interest. That's one of the cases where public, for lack of a better term, public shaming is actually the best way in there. But let's get the text up there. Could I get it on the screen up here so I'm not straining my neck, please?
I'm not taking away anyone's right.
No, I know. I know.
Just to put the amendment forward or ideas that could further their campaign.
I do appreciate and understand that clarification. All right, no, okay. So let's go with a 4. Let's call it 4.81. Okay. There are no elected candidates. It's been a long week. That any elected representative that is a declared candidate in an election in a current election may not propose such a rule, and it would be 4.81, so it would be referring to itself. Does that meet your approval, Mr. Jager? We'll give it a minute to read a few times over.
Point of clarification, please. David Allard, Seminar Métis. The 30-minute before calling question, does that apply to, does it start once again with an amendment motion?
It does not. It only applies to the main resolution or motion at hand. Any motions attached to it, you can call question and, if needed, force a vote according to standing rules.
Thank you.
Or potential candidate, any elected representative or potential candidate? Yeah. We kind of had that on the first one and then it got lost there.
Not to, is not every citizen a potential candidate?
It could be, and that's why this, I think this clarifies it, clears things up. Anyone
Point of clarification, the resolution states that after the election starts, so it would be a knowledge, public knowledge as to who it would apply to, no potential candidates available after the election starts.
Yeah, because theoretically, every one of our citizens is a potential candidate at all times. See me later.
Okay, we're going to open this up to
Sorry,
comments.
just point of clarification. The previous speaker mentioned that the resolution states after election has been called, but I don't see that anywhere in the original resolution. It actually states that they may make election rules regarding the matter, and that basically says at any time pertaining to an election, not after an election is called.
If I just from the Electoral Act, if I can be so bold as to speak on behalf of the committee, the amendment that's just been proposed would take effect when there's already an election been called, because it says if you're in a current election, whereas the other portion would apply to any time where there is no current election, or maybe one contemplated but hasn't been called yet. So one of the concerns and one of the things I was raising, if there's a potential election, you don't know who's going to be running, you don't know any of that information, but whereas that amendment includes, okay, so an election's been called, a special MNGA has been called to perhaps consider rules for the election that's ongoing, that any representative, so a member of the MNGA who's declared for that election that's ongoing is ineligible to, where's the wording, would be ineligible to, or is not able to propose such a rule. That would not preclude anyone intending to run in a future election that may or may not come up to bring a rule, the way that it's written at this point.
Okay, go ahead, Dave, Mike 4.
Yeah, I'm David Arts, I'm an Métis. I still support my postponement. I'm speaking against this amendment. I think the amendment is one big step in the good direction. The problem with this is, and it just reflects the robustness of our discussions, is the fact that this is just one example of potentially many others where there may be a gray areas and conflicts of interest. We could be going down a rabbit hole, which is my reasoning for postponing this. Someone may not be a declared candidate, but they may be a friend of a declared candidate, and they may be on the MNGA, and so on and so forth. So I speak against this. I appreciate all the discussion, quite robust, but I think it's not fully fleshed out. I'm fine staying here another 3-4 hours and changing the wording so everyone's happy. But barring that, I'm against this amendment for those reasons. Thank you.
For the amendment.
All right, are there any other speakers? Okay. So we'll first vote on the amendment. Correct. Okay, please get your voting devices out. Yep. Okay, we're going to read the amendment before we vote so that our online folks can hear it again, please.
Okay, so the proposed amendment is to add to the resolution under this section B for Article 4.8 of the Métis Nation Governing Assembly Act, a new, where'd my amendment go? To add to the resolution 4.8.1 that any elected representative who is a declared candidate in a current election who is a member of the MNGA may not propose such a rule.
Okay, so please get your voting devices out. A, in favor, B, oppose, and C, abstain. Not yet. Hold on.
Those are still your three options for voting, but we'll let you know when the poll is open.
John, if I may, I'm just getting messages that people have lost their connection to the Zoom link. Is it down?
Okay, so now voting is open. Please vote accordingly. 1A in favor, 2B opposed, 3C abstain. Uh, 10 seconds. 10 seconds. If you have not voted, please do so now. You can, but I think they're tuckered out. Voting is now closed. We have the final votes tallied. 87 in favor, 26 opposed, 7 abstentions.
All right, so we are now back to the motion to postpone, Resolution 6 as amended. So just a reminder of your voting options. A in favor, B opposed, and C abstain. We will read it one more time for the online folks.
Don't quite know what we're voting on.
John's going to read it.
So the motion is to postpone indefinitely the resolution, which if I could have on the screen, please, I can read the amended resolution. Thank you. So the resolution is, be it resolved that the following be added to the Electoral Act as Section 45, regulatory authority. The Métis Nation Governing Assembly may, by resolution, make election rules regarding matters not specifically set out in the Electoral Act. Such rules will expire 30 days after Election Day for the election they pertain to. And the following be added as Article 4.8 to the Métis Nation Governing Assembly Act. 4.8, the MNBC may, by resolution, make election rules regarding matters not specifically set out in the Electoral Act. Such rules will expire 30 days after Election Day for the election they pertain to. 4.8.1, that any elected representative who is a declared candidate in a current election who is a member of the MNBC may not propose such a rule.
We're just going to take a moment before voting because we may have an issue with the last online poll. So please hold tight.
Point of clarity, we may have lost track over here, but the way we're following along, a motion had been made to postpone indefinitely, then was withdrawn. Have we missed something? Seriously, point of clarity. Who made the motion, who seconded it, and is it still on the floor?
So thank you for that point of clarity. Dave Allard brought the motion forward. It was seconded by Vince, and the motion, from what we understand, was not withdrawn. All right, just to clarify, we are now going to be voting on the motion to postpone. Would anybody like the resolution read one more time? Just so we're clear? No, we're good? Okay.
I think just a little clarification on yes is this, no is this, please.
Okay, just to clarify, it is a motion to postpone indefinitely. And so there are your options. A, in favor, B, opposed, C, abstain. I'm getting confused in this.
Voting open? Okay, voting is open, so 1A in favor to postpone, 2B opposition to postpone and consider immediately, 3C to abstain. We'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, voting is now closed. Okay, we have the final results tabulated. "32 in favor of postponement, 84 opposed to postponement, and 3 abstentions.
Okay, we are back to resolution 6. And we do have, is it an online comment? Could we please have a person who called question come to the microphone? Okay.
Question, Salmon Arm. David, question.
Okay, everybody, you're getting your exercise with your fingers this morning. Resolution 6, A in favor, B opposed, C abstain. 1 second. Okay, we're open for voting.
Voting is open. So 10 seconds. 10 seconds. If you have not voted, please vote now. Voting is now closed. We have the final results tallied. 98 in favor, 21 opposed, and 5 abstentions.
All right, we will move right along. Page 80, if you are following along, Resolution 7, and I will pass this on to our clerk, John Beaker.
Resolution 7, subject, extension of voting timelines. This will affect the Electoral Act, submitted by the MNGA via the Electoral Act Committee to the AGM clerk on June 4th, 2023, requires a majority vote to pass. Whereas mail-in ballot voting is one of the options for Métis citizens to cast their votes, and the length of time for receipt and return of mail ballots can be affected by a variety of issues, many of which are beyond the control of MNBC. Citizens have expressed concerns regarding the tight turnaround time for mail-in ballots to be received and returned. It is in MNBC's interest to have as many citizens vote as possible, and short timelines to return mail-in ballots may deter people from voting. And approval of this resolution will give electors an additional week to return their mail-in ballots. Be it resolved that in Article 8.2 of the Electoral Act, strike the number 40 and insert 45 in its place. In Article 9.1, strike the word immediately and insert the day after the close of nominations at the end so that the article will read, 9.1, if only one candidate is nominated for any one office at the close of nominations, the Chief Electoral Officer shall declare that candidate a claim to office the day following the close of nominations. C, in Article 11.1, strike the number 7 and insert 5 in its place. And in the printed copy, I noticed in the 9.1, there is a typo where it says, if nominated for I1, that should read any. I think everyone agrees that I found one of my typos. Not quickly enough, apparently, so thank you.
Do I have a mover?
Sean Davern, Provincial Youth Chair. I so move.
You're so tall. Jaden Rogers, Region 6 Youth Rep, and I'll second.
Sean, would you like to speak?
Sean Davern, Provincial Youth Chair. I think there's been a lot of discussion with the previous resolution that was yesterday on different methods of voting around people not receiving ballots and all that. I think that the ability to allow for more time for those mail-outs to arrive. We live in BC. There are people living in rural BC, remote BC, and on top of that, we have a really good history of wildfires. So adding that little bit of extra time will allow for a lot more voices to come in. Thank you.
Jaden, would you like to add?
Hello, everyone. Jaden Rogers, Region 6 Youth Representative. Like I said, I'm in Region 6, and though I am a youth, and I think most of my demographic tends to vote online, I have heard of many people having issues up in northern BC when they send in a mail-in ballot and it never makes it there. I always want to advocate to hear the most voices in British Columbia in terms of what our leadership should be. So that is my main reasoning, and that extending those timelines to help people get their votes in, I see that as a positive thing. Thank you.
Linda Van Weringen. I am also in favor of this motion here. I am one of those people that live in a rural area and do not always get my mail on time, so I think, yeah, this should go through. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right. This is good. This is quick. I will let you, okay. Please let us know when we're open for voting. Just a reminder, A in favor, B opposed, C abstain. You are ready to vote.
Ten seconds. 10 seconds. If you have not voted, please do so now. Voting is now closed. We have the final results. $115 in favor, 1 opposed, 3 abstentions.
Okay, everybody, we have decided, since it's 10 minutes from the scheduled health break, that we're going to actually take it now and ask you to come back. Be on time, please, sharp 10:10.
10:10. What time is it now?
Is it 5:10?
Oh, 50. My watch is running fast. Say, sir, 10:05.
Sorry, 10:05, please, everybody. 10:05.